Hello and welcome to another Arsecast Extra, as always, with James from Gunnerblog. James, good morning to you.
Good morning, Andrew. Or goodly morning, maybe.
Goodly morning, yeah. Pre-season ended with a win over Lyon, the Emirates Cup, the first of many cups that we will be lifting in the months ahead, I'm sure. So maybe it isn't.
Isn't it true that every time we win the Emirates Cup, we win the league and Champions League as well?
Yes.
I'm pretty sure that's how it goes.
I mean, I think there could be an alternate universe in which that is true.
Sure, exactly.
And we just happen to be in the wrong one.
Yeah, in the multiverse, the Arsenal multiverse.
Exactly.
That's the reality.
Exactly. In the Arsenal multiverse, we are tired of all the trophies we have. Can't we just lose for once? But, you know.
We yearn for defeat.
Yes.
The ennui of victory has become too much.
Exactly. A little variety. That's all we're asking for, you know? Anyway.
To begin at the end, Andrew.
Yes.
What did you make of the fact that there wasn't the advertised penalty shootout?
I have to say I was unbelievably disappointed. Genuinely, right. Because I wanted to see Ainsley Maitland-Niles take a penalty against Arsenal, and for him to do something outrageously cool and casual and put the ball in the net and then do something, you know, that kind of, hey, you guys, you know me, this is what I do, you know. Just
open his hands to reveal a small baby bird that he'd been holding throughout the whole 90 minutes.
A little finch flying off into the North London sky. Yeah, for that reason alone, I was quite disappointed that it didn't happen.
Well, I gather they announced it to the crowd.
Yeah, I was watching it on the stream, and it said, "Ladies and gentlemen, please stay in your seats. There will be a penalty shootout." And then I saw there was a picture of one of the staff talking to Mykhaylo Arteta, and he said something that Mykhaylo Arteta it looked like he didn't really like it. Like he was like, "What did you say? What was that? What are you talking about?" And he sort of explained a bit further that the cameras moved away, so I didn't get any more of that interaction. And then, obviously, it didn't happen in the end, which I guess is a bit disappointing.
What do you imagine he was saying? Please, Mykhaylo, we cannot have the penalty shootout. Ainsley Maitland-Niles says he's going to take the penalty with this Mickey. Like, I don't know. What did they...
I don't know. I mean, I presume it was a communication from... I assume it was Lyon who didn't want the penalty shootout. I think that's
they didn't want no smoke. They'd already been smoked by us on set pieces in the 90 minutes. And they thought, penalties, that's just 10 set pieces.
Yeah, they're going to...
We stand no chance.
Yeah, Nicholas Jover getting his wallet back in return for those 2 goals that we scored yesterday.
On the touchline, just pointing at corners of the goal.
Yeah.
Telling players where to kick it.
Well, I mean, what did you think? Were you looking forward to a penalty shootout?
Of course. They're good fun, penalty shootouts.
Yeah, the zero peril. And I know this is something Mykhaylo Arteta has wanted throughout pre-season. Some teams have been open to it, some not so open to it. It seems a bit weird, though, that Lyon agreed to it and then maybe changed their minds. But it was a hot day and maybe everyone was just a bit tired. They needed a more substantial warm down to get themselves ready for the season ahead. Maybe there was actually a good physical reason for it not to happen. I don't know.
Maybe they'd have plane to catch. I don't know. But yeah, that was a bit strange, having been advertised and announced so close to it. Speaking of penalties, I don't know if you saw any of the Community Shield. In fact, I know you didn't see any of the Community Shield. But Andre Onana was up to his...
I saw your post, actually.
Aston Villa midfielder Andre Onana, as he was dubbed during the Euros, of course, Amadou. But yeah, Andre Onana, the Manchester United goalkeeper, was doing that mental thing again where he stands off to one side of the goal and points where he wants the attacker to put it.
Yeah, and then promptly lets the ball in that very side. Yeah.
No, I did make the point that that's quite a lot of his goalkeeping appears to be like that, not just penalties.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, go ahead. You know, what's the worst that could happen?
After you, sir.
I enjoyed the bit. I saw a story during the week where he said, Manchester United fans, I'm going to take even more risks this season. I was like, oh, yeah. Please do.
Bring it on.
Bring it on. I am so ready for that. Yeah. But what about that particular shoot? Was there anything about that other than Andre Onana being Andre Onana? Or
don't know. No, that was it. I just wanted to sort of
just get that out there.
Get that out there. I don't really have any comment on the Community Shield more generally.
No, I couldn't be arsed.
City won.
Yeah.
Ho-hum, I guess.
Yeah, I genuinely could not be fucked about that game at all, though, which is a bit unusual because it's sort of like this sort of showpiece for the new season ahead, isn't it? And you're like, well, you've had so much football this summer that I needed just to take that weekend off or not pay too much attention to it. And, I say that having sat through an Arsenal friendly against Lyon as well, but it was just like it felt unnecessary. Nobody needed that game.
No, and I think if you go back a few years to when the Community Shield, then the Charity Shield was in its heyday, it was kind of the first televised football match for several months, usually. Certainly the first televised club game for several months. So I do think it held slightly more allure. But as you just pointed out, we were able to watch an Arsenal game against Lyon the following day. And on Wednesday, we'd seen another Arsenal friendly streamed. So I think, it's less exciting these days to be like, I'll watch two clubs that I don't particularly like play out a game for a trophy that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. A bit like the Emirates Cup, I suppose.
Don't say that, Andrew. Don't say that. You'll be barred from the stadium with
I take
blasphemy like that.
I take it back, of course. But we did win the Emirates Cup, retained the prestigious Emirates Cup with a 2-0 win over Lyon. Again, a very familiar-looking first 11.
Very familiar looking.
Couple of changes from the team that played on Wednesday night against Bayer Leverkusen. Martinelli came back in. I think Thomas Partey was in. Havertz started up front. Rice and Saka getting a start to get some minutes into the legs to get them ready for Wolves. So not much in the way of new players or anything like that.
No. Calafiori on the bench. And he would, of course, make his debut later on. But it was a very familiar lineup, but good to see Saka and Rice back in the starting 11. And yeah, I think those sort of, Jorginho versus Partey, Martinelli versus Trossard, whether it's Jesus or Havertz up top, those feel like the kind of close selection calls maybe ahead of the Wolves game on Saturday.
Yeah, we might come to that a bit later on. I think we have a question about who might start or who we would like to start in that game, but we can come back to that. But Declan Rice, for all the talk of whether he's a 6, whether he's an 8, whether he's a 6'8", whatever it is, about what he does in midfield, one thing that doesn't get a great deal of attention is the quality of his set-piece delivery. People don't really talk about it because he's so good at everything else, and they're trying to define his role and figure out where he's going to play next season, if it's going to be further ahead, if he's going to anchor the midfield, if it might be a little from column A, a little from column B. The quality of his corners from that side of the pitch is consistently excellent. Yeah. They caused all kinds of problems yesterday and led, of course, to the 2 goals that we scored.
Yeah, absolutely. Really good deliveries to the far post. And I do think it's an underrated aspect of his game. It's not an underrated aspect of Arsenal's game, though, our strength on set pieces. And good to see that, that's still there. There's a bit of innovation as well. It's always interesting, wasn't it? On the Arsenal.com commentary, they were kind of talking about this topic a lot. Sorry, Rocky's going absolutely mad next door. He's very excited about it.
He's on the Coca-Cola this morning. That's it. A big can of Coke, and he's whizzing around.
He really is. Yeah. What was I going to say?
On
Arsenal.com, they were making this sort of having a big discussion about, is it a problem, to unveil your set piece routines in pre-season? It's an interesting question, that, isn't it? I mean, should we have kept our powder dry in pre-season, or is it more valuable to actually practice the routines and profit from them?
Yeah, I think probably the latter, because there is only... how much variation can you have with corner routines? Right-footed guy takes an in-swinging corner, puts it to the near post, puts it to the middle, puts it to the back post, And that's kind of about it in terms of the delivery. And then, of course, you've got the movement of players. And I suppose one thing that was maybe a little bit absent yesterday was the fact, I don't know if I missed this or if it didn't happen, but I didn't really notice Ben White being Ben White.
No,
it was
the sheer aura of Ben White.
Yeah. I mean, the first goal, the header from Saliba, maybe the keeper could do a little bit better, but when you look at it when the ball goes in, there's nobody anywhere near him. Like, Ben White is not causing him problems or anything like that. So
what we don't know, Andrew, is what Ben White was saying under his breath to the goalkeeper.
That's true. Whispering the sweet nothings of cornery love to the goalkeeper.
The corner whisperer himself. You make a good point. I mean, as set-piece routines go, these were fairly straightforward.
Yes.
Good delivery to the back post, attack it with some very tall players. And I was pleased to see Saliba score in that situation. I think it's, Gabriel, we know all about how good he is attacking the ball in the penalty area. But I think Saliba, that's an area, there aren't many areas where you say this, but an area where he could improve potentially.
Yeah, maybe so. We have that size, we have that presence, and we have that do you say, like, because you're always or have garnered this reputation for being good at set pieces, it sort of makes the opposition a little bit nervous in some ways, because, they know that you have players like Saliba, like Gabriel, like who else? Ben White is in there. We have a big team in there, which can cause them all kinds of problems. So
I was thinking about this, and I was like, if Calafiori, starts games as the left back, and we've kind of got 4 centre halves in the back 4 potentially. Presumably on a corner, they're all going to be in the box.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, who's going to be stood on the halfway line trying to stop the counter-attack?
Good question. I suppose it's going to have to be one of the midfielders or the forwards, whether that's...
Yeah. I mean, if it was Partey, sometimes he goes up in the penalty box as well for a corner.
I don't think he wanted to be Jorginho based on that little moment we saw in the second half.
It might be like a Trossard or a Martinelli.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's quite unusual. Typically it's your fullbacks, isn't it, who kind of hold that line and do that bit of defending.
Well, Zinchenko could be one of those, because he looks like he's going to be in the team, I think, at the start of the season. So he could be that guy. But you're right, and if someone like Mikel Merino comes in, there's another 6'2" guy.
Rice is taking the corners, your defensive midfielder potentially.
I mean,
maybe it's just going to be 11 men in the box, Andrew.
Just fucking lash them all in there. That's it. Forget the sophistication. Just get it in the mixer for the big guy. Yeah.
But anyway, pleased to see we've still got that knack, because it was very, very valuable to us last season. Well,
it was valuable to us yesterday, if we're talking about the goals that we scored. And there's maybe something to be said about open play. Is that the tactical development of the new season? Scoring some goals from open play, as they call it? Because I think, there were moments yesterday where just that end product wasn't quite there. Was it the final pass, the final action wasn't 100% there from a few players? And I think that's normal, because it is still preseason. It has been a busy summer for some of these guys. Saka, starting on the right-hand side, I think you could see that he is, easing his way back into what you might call proper match fitness. Martinelli, Havertz, were away with Germany and Brazil during the summer as well. So they're really building up their minutes. But, to have the safety blanket of set-piece goals while you're trying to find that kind of fluency in the final third, those final actions, is pretty useful.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there were goals there for us potentially yesterday. Saka, you mentioned, I think he could have had a couple, at the back post. One really lovely delivery from Zinchenko, maybe 2 deliveries from Zinchenko, I can't remember now. But yeah, I think he ought to have scored. And, speak about Saliba maybe being better at attacking the ball in the air. Maybe, again, that's an area of Saka's game where he could potentially improve.
We're talking about that quite a bit on the Arsenal.com commentary. I think it was David Hillier was saying, he's definitely been practicing his heading. You can see that. And I think I don't know how true that is. I think it might have just been the fact that he had a couple of opportunities that came his way.
The ball came to him at head height.
The ball came to him at head height, and he had no other option. I'm not sure it's. I'm not sure. I mean, maybe he is. Maybe that is something that he's looking at as a way of improving his output. And if it is, great. But I think you're right. The one in the second half in particular where he headed down to the post, it was maybe, an opportunity that he could have taken with his feet, because by the time he bent down that far, it was hard to get the precision on it. Hit the post, I think, and went away. But he did have some headed opportunities. I think the one at the back post was from Martinelli rather than Zinchenko. Right. So, go on.
It's interesting. I was just going to say, we have seen players go through that development before. Very different player, but you think of someone like Cristiano Ronaldo, who was a kind of tricky winger who suddenly developed the capacity to score towering headers inside the penalty box. I don't think Saka's ever going to be that guy, but Martinelli in his early days showed a real capacity to score goals with his head, and we've not seen a great deal of that recently. So if we could get those wide forwards in round the back post, there might be another 2 or 3 goals a season there for them. And, when we're talking about gaining an extra couple of percent, that could make all the difference.
Yeah, could do. I think there were opportunities as well for Havertz and Martinelli as well, who, I thought was lively and impactful in this game. The end product wasn't there, but to me, I was encouraged by the Martinelli performance, even if he couldn't find his way to get the shot off. That brilliant pass from Havertz, by the way. What a pass that was that sent him through. And again, this is maybe a match fitness, a sharpness thing with Martinelli, where you're looking for him to produce, where I think, 18 months ago, if Martinelli had been sent through like that, you would have put good money on him applying the finish. So you could be a little bit worried that maybe that moment is more aligned with what we saw from him last season in terms of not being able to find the end product. But overall, I have to say I was quite encouraged by his performance, and I think it is going to be a very interesting battle, if you want to call it that, between himself and Trossard. Trossard was very good against Bayer Leverkusen. Martinelli got the start yesterday, didn't get the goal, but I think, if these two guys can really push each other, then it could be very beneficial for us in the season ahead.
I think so. And like you, I've been mostly encouraged by what I've seen of Martinelli in pre-season. I think he's looked sharp. I think he's looked hungry. To me, in this game, he looked like a player who, had seen Trossard play pretty well in midweek and is thinking, if I want to get into this starting lineup for the Wolves game, I need to produce something. He did take a knock, didn't he, early in the game? I think there was a challenge. It might have been from Ainsley Maitland-Niles, actually, that caught him around the ankle. And I don't know if that impeded his performance, maybe prohibited him from getting away from the final defender as we might want him to. But yeah, I think he's had a positive pre-season period, even if the end product hasn't always been there.
I think it was that big lumpy guy who used to play for. Did he play for Southampton? Yeah, Chaleta Sarr.
Sarr, that's it. Yeah,
he did Saka as well, didn't he? In the second half as well. It was like, oh no! I was watching that moment when Saka was about to burst down the right hand side, and I could see your man come over. I was going, as a central defender, I know exactly what this guy's going to do here, and please don't do it. But thankfully, Saka was wise enough. I think he rode the challenge pretty well, even though it was a foul.
Yes, it did look like it was going to end in disaster, that one. But the Trossard-Martinelli thing, I think, is in a really healthy place. That's not to say it's perfect. It's not to say, we don't expect more from Martinelli or more from that flank, potentially. But I think they're a really interesting contrast and very close in competition. And I'm hoping that will motivate them to produce their respective best over the next few months. Because, honestly, it really does feel like toss of a coin stuff. I think who plays may ultimately be determined by the opponent, and the style of play that we're likely to come up against. Because stylistically, they are really different.
Yeah. What did you make sort of the overall performance then from Arsenal? I thought it was sharp. I thought the press looked good. You know, it sort of goes without saying that Martin Odegaard was kind of key to what we were doing in many areas. And it looks like a fairly well-oiled machine at this point, this Arsenal team, even if that sort of issue of familiarity, I think, is one which, you know, bleeds into what people think about a new season, because part of what makes a new season exciting is seeing new players, and we'll come to that maybe in a sec. But, you know, overall, how did you gauge the level of the performance based on what we've seen throughout preseason? You know, from the US tour and what we've seen back in England.
Yeah, I thought it was good. I mean, it's always difficult to know, really, with a friendly game, because you've got teams that are at different points in their preparation, and, you know, you don't know exactly how strong your opposition are at various points in time. But for what I think, Lyon, their season kicks off around the same time as ours. I might be wrong about that. I thought it was a good performance. I think Arteta lent into a lot of what worked last season. And actually, perhaps that's going to be a good thing. You know, go back to last season, I think there was quite a lot of change in terms of the way we built up. You know, the team we started the season with, we had Thomas Partey at right back, Kai Havertz left midfield. You know, we didn't quite have the same structure and fluidity that we did the year before. And it probably cost us. You know, if you look back at, say, that home game against Fulham, you know, maybe it hurt us that we were going through these kind of growing pains in that early period of the season. I think that might be in Arteta's mind. And perhaps he's thinking, well, listen, I know I might have one or two new players, but in those opening fixtures, especially when they're such tough fixtures, we're going to lean heavily on what carried us through the majority of the second half of last season. I think there's a lot of logic to that.
Yes, because it was really good. Like, it was really fucking good. So I understand that completely. And it does make a lot of sense. And hopefully that is something that we can bank on, as well as, you know, hopefully adding to the squad and bringing some new players in and easing them into action. Speaking of which, of course, we got to see Riccardo Calafiori in action for the first time. The Italian stallion came on in the second half to rapturous applause.
Yeah, it's good. I thought most of the 60,000 crowd would have fainted, you know, at the mere sight of the man. But they were able to keep it together.
They did, and well done.
Give him a really warm welcome, which was good.
Yeah, played a bit at left back and then played a bit at centre half, of course, when Arteta made a load of changes late on. I mean, we can't say anything about what we think of his performance or anything like that, because, you know, it's 20 odd minutes in a friendly, but nice to see him out there. And the way they're going to ease him into this season, I think, will be quite interesting. Yeah.
You know, they have taken their time with him, and he did have a bit of a helter-skelter week when he signed for Arsenal and, you know, flying all over the globe. And they've obviously just sort of thought, well, look, let's put the brakes on here and not rush him. But listen, pleased to see him part of it. And yeah, I'm intrigued to see how they kind of manage his introduction over the next few weeks.
Sorry, I had my mic on mute there for a second. So
right.
I was just agreeing with you. It's not the thing where we've been disconnected. Yeah, so
I thought you'd fainted.
Yeah, I had actually. That's what it was.
At the thought of Riccardo Calafiori.
What else? I mean, what about Ethan Nwaneri and Miles Lewis-Skelly again getting minutes in pre-season? I watched your video yesterday where you were like counting through the squad and wondering, like, could they get on the bench for, you know, for a game? We have a big squad as it stands. We've got a lot of players as it stands. I think there is going to need to be some departures. Is going to need to be some, what the fuck? There are going to need to be departures before maybe more arrivals come in, but it is something I spoke about on the Arsecast on Friday as well, is this idea that we want new players, we want exciting new signings, we want to bolster the squad from back to front. We need new attacking options, midfielders, all of those things. But at the same time, we want to see Ethan and Miles come through and get opportunities and get playing time. So there is that balancing act to be had, isn't there, with these two in particular? They've been very, very impressive, I think, over the course of pre-season. They look the most ready. I think if, I've said this before, I think if they had to play tomorrow in a league game, you'd worry a little about their inexperience, but I think they've shown that they are on the cusp of being ready for first team football. So this is a very interesting aspect to this season because they will have had a taste of it. They played in front of 60-odd thousand people on Wednesday and 60-odd thousand people at the Emirates yesterday, as well as all those big crowds in the USA. That gives them a taste of something that I think, they're going to want a lot more of. So the come down, if you want to call it that, of maybe under 21 football playing, at the training ground, smaller pitches, behind closed doors games, all of those things is going to be a little bit of an adjustment for them. So I'm really curious to see how the manager continues their integration over the course of this season when realistically, they're probably not going to be involved in the first team squad until we get into something like the EFL Cup or some Champions League games. Yeah.
I mean, when I ran those numbers, trying to figure out what our bench might look like for the opening day against Wolves, it is genuinely tricky to see them getting a place. Obviously, there could be a few departures between now and then, but as things stand, there's a very good chance they're not even in the matchday squad, which would be a come down. And there might be things in the next week or so that offset that. Don't know how meaningful these things are really, but they could have their squad numbers bumped up, couldn't they, to something that's more appropriate maybe for a first team player. Although these days first team players have all kinds of squad numbers.
Yeah.
And Miles Lewis-Skelly having 49 is quite a nice number from an Arsenal perspective.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, you wouldn't want to give that up, would you? If you're like an Arsenal fan and you got the number 49, that's a nice number to have in your back. I saw a bit of chat last week about have they given Nwaneri the number 10? I feel like that is not
maybe a bit soon.
Maybe just a bit soon, and I feel like this might be one where even if Nwaneri asks for it in the way that Smith Rowe asked for it, Mikel Arteta might say, you know what? Just take your time. Take your time.
I mean, they could be formally promoted to the first team, which in a literal sense means that when they arrive at London Colney, they turn, I think it's left rather than right, and go and get changed in the senior dressing room every day and train with those players every day. That could happen. But even so, I think it might be a bit early. Because like you, I think the majority of their football this year is going to be played with the under-21s.
Which is, I think, normal. They're obviously hugely talented and they've got all kinds of potential, and they've made a great account of themselves, along with some of the other young players as well. It's worth pointing out. Yeah. They've done very well, but they are going to have to sort of adjust to where they are in their careers at still a very tender age. They're both only 17 years of age. So they've got a lot of growing still to do, both in terms of their physical, mental, sporting development and playing at a level where, I think they can still be tested is part of what they're going to have to go through.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Lewis-Skelly's a bit older. He'll be 18 in September.
Oh, ancient. Get rid.
Yeah, he's past it.
He's old.
Guy. We need to start thinking about who the next Miles Lewis-Skelly's going to be. And Nwaneri's a fair bit younger. He's not 18 until March. But I do wonder if it's a situation that will be revisited in January as well, based on how involved they have been or not. Is that a time where you could think, okay, maybe these guys are ready to go out and play on loan somewhere? I think that's a possibility. I think it has to be a possibility because they're approaching the point where I think under 21 football is probably not going to do enough for their development.
Yeah. That's going to be interesting to see what they might put in place for two young players who really do look like they have the ability to make it through to the first team squad. And we're saying that about a first team squad at Arsenal right now that is as good as we've seen for a long time. And this is no disrespect to anyone like Bukayo Saka or Smith Rowe, but there was a period when they came through where maybe the level wasn't quite as high. And I'm not saying it's easier for them, but it just maybe provides a little more in terms of opportunity. So whether they stay in England, whether they go abroad for an experience there to play in a different kind of football, it will be fascinating to see how that goes for them.
Yeah, no disrespect to Bukayo Saka or Gabriel Martinelli, but probably quite a lot of disrespect to Willian in what you just said, which I think is fair.
It went unsaid. Unsaid. It was implied, James.
Sorry. Saturday's not my forte.
Listen between the lines, I think is what they say. What else about this? Eddie Nketiah didn't get off the bench. Now, he has played in every preseason game. He's captained the side at times during preseason as well. And look, you can put 2 and 2 together and come up with 5 very easily, but it was maybe something that we could look at in the light or the context of reports that Arsenal and Marseille are talking again about his future. David Ornstein, I think, reported last week that Arsenal were ready to sanction a loan move with a €30 million obligation, 25 million or 30 million euro obligation for Eddie next year, which I think, based on, certainly what we talked about and what we might bring in for certain players, would be a very, very good amount of money for Eddie. The fact that it would be next season, I don't know the mechanics of that. Obviously, we did that with David Raya, didn't we, when we signed him on loan with the obligation to buy and went through with that. So whether that has any impact on what we can do this summer financially, I'm not 100% sure. But what did you read into the fact that Eddie didn't get off the bench yesterday?
Well, yeah, I think he's headed towards the exit. And it might have been your piece I read in your blog about, the money we got for Balogun after the prolific season he had. And we're in a similar ballpark for Eddie, despite the fact that, he didn't have the most prolific of seasons last year. And I think maybe at that time, Balogun was a kind of more exotic, enticing prospect than what a 24, 25-year-old Eddie Nketiah is at this point in time. So I'm with you in that I think it's a pretty favourable deal. I think as well, I don't know this, but I wonder if Arsenal will have built other clauses into it, perhaps a sell-on or something like that protects them if he does move back to the Premier League in some form. I think it's a good deal for us, and I think it could be a really good move for Eddie. I think it could be a league where he flourishes and builds his reputation and gets to play high level of football in a fantastic stadium. I mean, I've been to the Velodrome, and I'm sure William Saliba will have told him all about it. It is quite the cauldron and an amazing place to play football. So it might be something that suits everybody.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a good deal for Arsenal. I think it's a good deal and a good move for Eddie, a chance to sort of kick on in his career, because I think it's gone a little bit stale for him at Arsenal. Didn't play much in the second half of last season. His last goal was in December, I think, in a Champions League game against PSV. Three
He's
of his
25 now.
Yeah, he had a 6-goal season last year, which is not brilliant, but I think he is capable of scoring. And I think he might look at someone like Balogun and look at what he did in Liga and say, you know what, I backed myself to score goals for Marseille in this league. And, it's not to be dismissive of the league, but I think if you're Eddie and you're looking at, where do you go next in your career, that kind of an experience, because I presume they have Champions League football, do they?
Good question. Don't know. What was the Ligue 1 table? I mean, they've got all this money in the transfer market that I can't figure out how they've got it. We've spoken about that before. I don't think they do. They finished in 8th.
Oh, well, then they definitely don't.
Yeah, I think they're outside of the European places entirely, which is partly, again, the mystery of the money. I mean, they're sort of trying to reboot the project, as it were.
Okay.
But, they are a club with some European pedigree, certainly have been around European competition in recent years. But no, he wouldn't have it next season. Right.
Okay. Well, I still think he can go there and score plenty of goals. And I don't know when we should expect movement on that, maybe this week, depending on when does league start date. Okay, this weekend.
Yeah, I think it is. So obviously it's a deal Marseille would like done, and from David's reporting, sounds like it's edging closer. Do we expect anything else to happen this week? Is there anything close? I mean, the only other sort of departure I can think of at this moment in time is Reiss Nelson, and there doesn't appear to be a great deal going on there. There were some reports a few weeks ago about Leicester, but they appear to be looking elsewhere. I mean, that feels like a move. If we're talking about Eddie needing to move and sort of reigniting his career, the same is true, if not more so, for Reiss Nelson. So that might be something that happens a little bit later in the window, but he feels like the only other potential departure at this moment in time. Yes. I mean, Aaron Ramsdale didn't play a minute of the 2 Emirates games.
Were you surprised by that?
I think I was a little bit surprised that he didn't get a half, just because I sort of think it's common sense or good practice that, you don't know. David Raya could have an accident and injure himself taking a goal kick or something, and suddenly you might need this guy. But I think it's indicative that his future lies elsewhere. I don't get the sense anything's particularly imminent on that, but it would certainly be one to watch, wouldn't it, over the coming weeks?
Yeah. And incomings, obviously there's talk about Mikel Merino and talk about...
When is there not, Andrew?
Yeah, he's been talked about a lot for a few weeks without it ever seeming to just take that step forward. But maybe this is the week when that happens. Who knows?
Maybe. It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because it's, as a reporter, sometimes it's tough to hold your nerve when you're seeing a lot of stuff about like, oh, it's close. And you sort of feel like, am I missing something here? But I think that, Arsenal's interest is very real, but they've not taken that to the club as yet. Certainly not in any sort of formal way. And I think it would be a pretty expedient deal to do if they decide to press the button. I think it's a player with a year remaining on his contract. Sociedad probably recognise that they have to take the money, and it's sort of a known price in the region of about 30 million euros. Will Arsenal do that this week? Maybe if they get a sale. Like I do think there seems to be a relationship. I've said this all summer between players going out and players coming in. We saw that with Smith Rowe and Calafiori. If Eddie Nketiah leaves the club this week, maybe that will give the impetus needed to go and get Merino.
Okay, well, we'll see. The clock is ticking, obviously, and the window closes August 30th, so there is still a bit of time. There were some quotes, weren't there, from Edu? Well, an attributed quote to Edu, which I think people were getting excited about. Like, someone talked to him during preseason, and he said, be patient, it'll all be very exciting in the end, or something like that. But,
Yeah, words to that effect.
Yeah.
But, it's about third hand at this point. So it's difficult to know.
Who knows?
I mean, listen, I think there's life in the window yet, certainly. And, we're rattling off a few deals that could happen in and out. It strikes me just talking about it, Smith Rowe out, maybe Nketiah out, talking about Calafiori in, Merino in. Like, these are players from the defensive and middle area coming in, and we're selling attacking players, So I still think there might be there would probably need to be an attacker added as well to bring another dimension to this squad.
I think I might have a question about that, which we could do in part 2. But before we go into that, a story this morning: Brooke Norton-Cuffy is joining Genoa on a permanent deal. A deal worth in total about $3.5 million with all the add-ons. There's a bit of variance in the reporting on that, but another young player who's going out. Mika Biereth is one who left a bit earlier in the summer, of course. Norton-Cuffy now going to Genoa. So, a nice move for him, an opportunity for him. And it got me thinking about somebody like, who else might go. Someone like Charlie Patino, who wasn't involved at all in the preseason. They've brought through Nwaneri and brought through Lewis Skelly, obviously with the idea that these guys are the future. Patino, despite being older and more experienced and perhaps, a little further advanced in his development, didn't play at all. So he's a player, I think, that maybe we look at as one of those low-key departures that adds a few million here and there to the transfer kitty.
Yeah. And again, these academy players are booked as profit. 3.5 million with a sell-on clause for Brooke Norton-Cuffy. That's a pretty decent deal. I know he's a player with some championship pedigree, but I'm satisfied, I would say, with that outcome. Yeah. And Genoa, what an interesting move for him. I mean, we spoke about Marseille being an interesting one for Eddie. Really interested to see how he gets on. In Italy.
I like it when young players test themselves and go abroad and try something different and have a different life experience. I think it's really good for them as players and as people too. You get to experience a different life and culture and language and all of those things, which can be really beneficial to you down the line. So let's hope it goes really well for him, and we'll see what happens with Patino and other players, sort of bubbling under who might be on the way out as well. Right. Anything else before we go into part two?
No, I don't think so. I think let's get into the questions.
All right. We will be back with your questions and more in part two right after this. Welcome back to the Arsecast Extra. This is part two of the show where we answer the questions that you sent to us on Threads. At Gunnerblog and at Arseblog on Threads, not Twitter.
No.
And also on the Arseblog Discord chat server, which you get access to if you are an Arseblog member on Patreon. By the way, we've got our Fantasy Football League coming up, big cash prizes. If you want to get involved with that and get all the stuff that we do throughout the season on Patreon, it's $6 a month, patreon.com/Arseblog. And given that it is a new platform, I'm going to give you the platform to ask the first question, James.
Well, I like this from Dan Marsden, who said, this is my first thread. And Dan says, Win the dog has been a great addition to the club, but do we need a backup dog for when Win is unavailable? Or should we look for a new dog that could take us to a new level?
Yeah. We should have a pack. We should just have a swarm of puppies at all time wandering around London Colney.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
There's a big theme of unpredictability, right? Can we be more? Maybe we get like a really dangerous rescue dog or something, just so we're more unpredictable. In the dog
that's it. Or we could just have a bit of variety: a Dalmatian here, a German Shepherd there, a Great Dane there, a Bichon Frise here.
That's true.
A beagle just beagling around. Maybe that's all it is. Which dog will it be today? Keep the players on their toes.
You just want to see London Colney overrun with dogs, basically.
I do.
It does seem mean that Win, as far as I can tell, takes no formal part in training. Like, imagine how much she must want to run around and grab the ball.
Yeah.
And would it not help us if our players, day in, day out, were training, dribbling away from a very excited Labrador? Do you not think that would be good for their development?
Oh, absolutely. I think that could be the marginal gain that we're looking for the new season ahead. What was it at the end of 38 games that made Arsenal champions? It was the dog dribbling.
Read about it in the Athletic.
Read about it. Long read in the Athletic. Talking to the breeders of Win, the sires, who are the parents, who are the parents' parents. They come from a long line of, nimble Labrador stock. Could be.
More dogs, I think. The window is still open, Edu.
All right, let's have another question. Let me see. I thought this was quite interesting. We sort of touched on the size of this Arsenal team in part one, but Alan Wayne 75, who's on Threads, says, how much fun would it be to watch this team play Tony Pulis' Stoke side from the 2010s?
Wow. A lot of fun, I think.
Yeah.
A lot of fun. Because, I'm just not sure they could have anything like the same impact as they did then.
We kicked the fuck out of them. Yeah, we'd absolutely kick them back. There'd be none of this sort of... they could be hurling in those Rory Delap long throws, left, right, and centre. Saliba and Gabriel just heading them away. You can't bully this Arsenal team. You just can't bully this Arsenal team, which I like a lot.
And I think David Raya would have a whale of a time just coming and collecting those long throws. I don't think that would unnerve him in the least. So, yeah, I think it would be great. In fact, let's try and get them back together, that Stoke team. You know, see if they fancy it.
I mean, I'm trying to think of like who was in that team.
So you're talking Ryan Shawcross, Rory Delap, Jonathan Walters.
Oh, he was annoying. He was a very annoying player.
Yeah. That's one of the reasons I quite like Roy Keane, is that it's very apparent that he hates Jonathan Walters.
That's true.
We have that in common.
Yeah. Glenn Whelan.
Glenn Whelan, my God.
Robert Huth.
Huth, of course. Premier League champion Huth, no less. Yeah, I'm trying. It's sort of before Stoke tried to get a bit sexier. Do you remember, like, there was a period where, like, the fans were clamouring for a different style of football, and they brought, like, that Turkish striker, and they tried to be to play actual football as opposed to rugby.
What was his name?
I don't know.
Tunkay?
Yes, I think it was.
There you
they
go.
signed him from Tunkay Sanley. Yeah, well remembered, mate.
Thanks. It's weird. I can't remember what I had for breakfast, but I can remember a weird
Stoke.
Turkish striker who played for Stoke. I'm not saying he's weird. Just it's one of those weird deals when you think back on it. It's sort of like George Weah playing for Chelsea, you know?
Yeah. Here's some more names from that period from Stoke. Just looking at different squads. Asmir Begovic.
Oh, the goalkeeper, yeah.
Danny Higginbotham.
Oh.
Danny Collins.
I don't remember. I don't know who that is. I don't know who that is. I've never heard of him.
Kenwyn Jones was there.
Oh, yeah.
I think if you were over 6'5", there was a chance you played for Stoke at some point. Jonathan Walters, Dean Whitehead.
Oh, gosh, Dean Whitehead. He had a gigantic head as well.
And it was white as well.
Yeah. I mean, never was
Etherington.
Matthew Etherington. Didn't Jermaine Pennant play for them as well?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
He did.
What a motley crew they were.
Abdoulaye Faye.
Oh, yeah.
The skipper, of course. They had about 5 Senegalese players. Ricardo Fuller.
Oh, yeah.
God, these were dark times. Anyway, if they want to get the band back together for a special one-off commemorative game against the current Arsenal 11, I'd really enjoy watching
I'd like to watch that, yeah, for sure.
What about this from Castle on Discord? Castle says, with the fee that's been reported for Neto to Chelsea, do you feel like we missed out on him considering our previous interest, or does his injury record mean that outlay is too big a risk for the reward?
I saw this one and I didn't like it. I didn't like this transfer. Like, Chelsea have been making, about 3 transfers a day for 6 months now, so it all becomes a blur. You don't know who they've got and what they're doing.
Now trying to sign João Felix again.
Again?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, that was the big story last night. They're after João Felix. Why not?
I mean,
he might just be the missing link, you know. The 100th attacker that they signed could be the one.
Yeah. Like, I really like Pedro Neto. I really like him. And I've said before, I think he's a player who would fit this Arsenal team. You know, both sides, fast winger, give us something a little bit different. And if we had brought him in, I would have been quite excited by him as a signing. But on the proviso that the fee was in some way linked to his injury record. And I'm not sure that it is. What is it? Nearly 60 million? Something like that? Or 55 million for Pedro Neto? I mean, I would have been tempted. I have to say, even at that price.
I mean, yeah, €63 million, I think, is the total with add-ons. Right. About 55 million.
I think he's a really good player. I really do.
You don't get much for your money these days. He's 24, but he is always injured, Andrew.
That is the thing. That is the thing. And I think if Arsenal, we know Arsenal have been quite interested in him for a while and maybe have done their due diligence on the injury record and decided, even if he can bring something to the table, we can't rely or we can't bank on his fitness, particularly maybe at a time where we have a question mark over someone like Gabriel Jesus, who I hope stays fit, but his injury record over the last 18 months might just give you a little bit of pause for thought, right? Can you 100% count on him to be fit throughout the season? No. So do you add another attacker whose injury record is a little bit suspect? Does that play into the way Arsenal thought about their interest in Pedro Neto? It might well do. And, we have Tomiyasu as well at the back, who's got some injury problems again, which is really unfortunate because he's a great player, but that would make you think about adding another injury-prone player to the squad. Jurriën Timber, he's got to prove that he can stay fit after his ACL. So there are maybe enough players in the squad as it is.
Partey.
Partey as well, another one who was absent for a lot of last season. Just completely one day to the next he was there and then he was gone, and that's something that could happen to him at any point as well. So are you being smart if you add another player who has obvious quality, but who could leave you in a situation where you're going, why did we spend the money on a guy whose injury record was like that?
Yeah. But if fit, he's a really good player. So I'm sure he'll do some good things at Chelsea and we'll, roll our eyes at it. But I think the club have made a good decision regarding the injury record. Look, maybe he'll prove me wrong. Maybe he'll, kind of like Rob Van Persie, find this kind of second wind of fitness that carries him through the second part of his career. But if you're buying based on the track record that's there currently, I think it is too big a risk. So
is it inevitable, James, that this becomes the summer of Project Mudryk? Arteta goes back in for his man.
I'm surprised we didn't have more questions about it.
So am I. I thought we would. The idea that, someone like Neto and all the other signings that Chelsea have made might release Mudryk into the world at a price that might be tempting. Do you see any realistic way that might happen? Because, we know, and you reported on it, that Arsenal were prepared to push the boat out for this player 18 months ago. Could they be tempted by a knockdown price? Should they help Chelsea out by giving them any kind of money for a player who has, by any measure, I think, been a bit of a flop since his arrival at England? And is the potential that Arsenal, Arteta, Edu, is the potential they saw in him still there, or has what he's done since he arrived in the Premier League proved that you can hope for something from a player, but when you see him, the reality of what he is means that you should just avoid and go a different direction?
Well, I want to be fair to Mudryk and say, in the right environment, a player can look very different. But looking at it right now, it does feel a bit like a bullet dodged, especially at the kind of money Arsenal were prepared to pay. And I would be shocked if Arsenal went back for him. Given what he's produced in the Premier League over the last 18 months, I'd be really shocked. What about you?
Oh, me too. Me too. But I do, there is part of me wonders, we can rebuild him.
Yeah, of course.
And
there's a history of us doing that with players who'd maybe been discarded at other clubs and, unlocking their potential. And there is a glee to be derived from that if you experience success with a player at another club's expense. But I'm just not sure I see it for Mudryk now.
Me neither. Me neither.
I do wonder, in terms of names that have been linked before, I mentioned this on Threads last night, and I sort of caveated it heavily with the fact that this is pure gut instinct on my part and very much not reporting or information. I hate that I have to clarify everything like that, but I do.
Sure.
But I do wonder if Rafinha might be a name that comes to the fore again.
Mm.
I know it's been mentioned, I think, in Spain as a possibility. But, obviously, Barcelona are after Nico Williams, aren't they? I mean, Arsenal would love Nico Williams as well. But if Barcelona were to get him, could Rafinha be someone who comes onto the market again? And Arsenal were super serious about the signing of him. And his career hasn't completely collapsed in the ways that Mudryk's had since he moved to Chelsea.
Yeah.
I know he's a little bit older, but someone suggested that to me. Do you think Arsenal could really go back for someone like Rafinha? And I have to say, that one I think maybe.
Well, I don't know if you've seen this or not, but Athletic Bilbao have just revealed Nico Williams is the new number 10. So my guess is that, you can never say never in the transfer market, but my guess would be that for this season, at least, he is going to stay there.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a bold move if he's not. Yeah, 44 minutes ago. There he is with his number 10 shirt.
So,
I mean, well, okay. Should we just delete this bit?
Yeah. Just re-record.
No, leave it in. Because I don't know. The way things went with Rafinha, I do think there was so much admiration for him. And it was, Arsenal felt they were really close on it. That's the one that if a player was to sort of come back on the market and be of interest to us again, I think it's more likely to be him than it is to be Mudryk.
Right. Well, how's he done at Barcelona? He's done all right, hasn't he?
Fine. Not amazing, not terrible.
Yeah.
He's still part of the Brazil setup. He's a really good player. And like Neto, can play either side. Barcelona need money.
They need money bad. So, and it's pure, like I say, speculation.
Speculation. But I wonder. I do think. Did you say you had a question about the attack? Or?
Yeah, I think it comes from the Discord from Michael Jewel Teta, who says, what's your priority signing in the last few weeks of the window? If you could choose one, a left 8, centre-forward striker, or somebody that can play one or both wings to cover Martinelli, which would it be? But I think the broader question is, what would you like to see happen with the attacking end of the pitch before the end of the window?
Something,
yeah, that's it. That's what I was thinking too, something. Let's just close down.
I'll be honest, I don't really know what the best thing to do is. I don't,
let me ask you this then. Do you think that Arsenal are planning something?
They must be.
That's my gut feeling as well. Like, I don't have any info on this, but I cannot help but think that when Mikel Arteta and Edu and his staff and all the analysts sit down and analyse what they got from the squad and what they could get more from, as I keep saying, this sort of Nketiah, Smith Rowe, Nelson, those three players, as much as they're, people are fond of their trajectory and how they've come through the squad, to me, they always seem like the most obvious players that we could upgrade. Smith Rowe is gone. Nketiah could go to Marseille. We don't know what's going to happen with Nelson, but I fully expect him to go. Like, I don't think you can let those three players go without bringing somebody else into the attacking lineup. And it feels to me as well that when I looked at the team yesterday and I looked at, some of the moments that we didn't make the most of, when Arteta has thought about how do I get more points, how do we score more goals, how do we get the 114 points or whatever it was that he said, tongue-in-cheek during pre-season, how do you do that? I don't know how you can possibly think you can do it without adding something to that front three. What exactly it is, I don't know. Who exactly it is, I have no idea. But I would be absolutely flabbergasted if Arsenal weren't on top of a number of situations or didn't have, 2 or 3 options that at some point they're going to pull the trigger on before the end of the window.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, we all sort of have kidded ourselves on that Smith Rowe's at number 8, but in Smith Rowe, Nelson and Nketiah, we're talking about 3 attacking players, right? And we're talking about 3 possible departures there. You cannot do that without bringing something else in. And I don't think there's a young player ready to kind of step up and fill that void. It's funny, when I was trying to work out, could Ranieri get on the bench or could Lewis Skelly get on the bench? Well, the answer is, if one of them was a centre forward, they'd have a pretty good chance.
Yeah.
But, they're not. And as for whether it should be a number 9, whether it should be a winger, I'm really not sure. I just think it's almost a bigger question than that. I think Arsenal just needs something more in that part of the pitch, and it could come in a variety of different ways. I mean, Nico Williams, I've said all summer long, is the one that they love. And I know that they've just given him a shiny new number 10 shirt, but as long as he's got that buyout clause in his contract, the option will always be there.
It's
in
whether,
theory.
In theory, but it's whether or not the player would be open to the move. We could trigger the release clause and he might not want to go. And maybe the fact that he's taken the number 10, at his club is an indication that for now he's happy where he is and he wants to stay. And I think, I don't want to say it would be disrespectful to take that shirt and then fuck off somewhere else. But if that happened to one of our players, you'd be like, well, if you were at least open to the possibility of leaving, why would you take that shirt?
That is true. What I would say is the buyout clause always gives him a get out in a way. Do you know what I mean? If someone comes and pays it, it won't be his fault, if you know what I mean.
Sure. I got you.
And if someone offers him a really massive salary, then I'm sure he will do it regardless of the timing. But listen, it's a difficult deal to do for lots of reasons, mainly how much money it will cost total as a package. That's why I think there must be other options as well. Whether Rafinha would be among them, who knows? Whether there are other younger players more like in Williams' profile. It's funny, isn't it? Because we talk about the left wing and we're like, we've got Trossard, we've got Martinelli. But I still wouldn't say no to someone who arrived in that position and could improve us.
Or at least give us the ability to, if you want to use Gabriel Jesus as a wide player, as cover for Saka or on the left-hand side, that frees him up to do that if you bring in maybe a more traditional centre forward. And I have to say, I think probably we can talk about it from our perspective as fans, and we can talk about it from, sort of objective perspective as well about what this team needs. But I think as well maybe about the players themselves, and what it might do to them to get a player who can just come in and give the squad that kind of boost and, a little bit of a confidence boost. And that, you have this other option. You have this other high quality player to give you something a little bit different in attack on days where, like a couple of games last season where it didn't really work for us. And we sort of ran through everything that we had to try and get the goals. That little bit of something extra, for our players and maybe for the opposition to worry about as well.
Absolutely. I also think it's worth saying that a lot in pre-season, we've seen Jesus starting up front and Havertz in midfield. Now, I don't know that will continue into the competitive season, but if it does, what have we got behind Jesus? Nothing, really.
Yeah.
If Eddie goes. So I think we're light on numbers. I think we're light on quality. I think we need something else in that part of the pitch. And I think Arsenal know that, to be honest. I just hope they can
pull it off, whatever it is. Yeah. All right. I think it's your question.
Okay. What about this one? I sort of wasn't actually prepped there.
I know.
That's what happened there. I just thought, how slowly can I speak to cover this gap?
Those old telephone lines where you called up for Team Talk and those kinds of things.
Exactly, yeah.
Welcome to Team Talk. Your call is being charged at 58 pence per minute.
The next question is from Threads, and it's from Andre Kanyeki. And Andre says, given our points total last year, but ultimately a trophyless season, what do you think are the minimum expectations from the Cronkies for this year? Would a similar season, title race, but ultimately no trophy be enough? or is there pressure really ramping up on Mykhaylo this year?
That's interesting because I've never thought about it from the owner's perspective.
No, we don't tend to, I guess.
No. I mean, I know there's expectation and hope among the fan base that we can get a trophy. And I think, we've had this discussion before, haven't we, about the need for silverware as evidence of, the quality of what we've done and what we've built. And I don't think there's any doubt that this is one of the best Arsenal teams we've seen in a long time. But, the old cliches about you're only judged on what you've won, you're judged on trophies, I don't necessarily ascribe to that 100%, but I think the best teams tend to win things, cups and trophies and leagues. And I think we are, in a cycle where it would be really, really disappointing if we weren't able to, get anything tangible from the quality that we have out there on the pitch and in the squad. What is the expectation from the Cronkies? I mean, I don't know. I think obviously they would want trophies. They would want silverware as a sort of, what's the word? I've completely forgotten the word. Anyway, they would want that, to maybe change the perception of them or to demonstrate that what they have done has been sufficiently...
An accolade.
Not even an accolade, but like, okay, we know there were doubts. Right. Lots of questions. We've done this, and now it turns out what we did was good, and please love us or whatever. I don't. It would
sort of cement the transformation,
of course,
in perception,
of course. And I think as a in inverted commas project, winning things is the be all and end all. I think that's certainly something Mikel Arteta wants. But I don't know that if we lost out on the league by a point again, or a single goal, or the ball not going over the line by half a centimetre, as was the case a few years ago in one of the league campaigns, that they would then turn around and say, well, you've had your chance, let's go a different direction. I think they will be. I think one of the most difficult things in football is consistency. And if Arsenal can consistently be a title challenger, there is something to be said for that, even if you don't quite get across the line. But obviously, I want that to happen, and I think everybody involved with Arsenal wants that to happen. So it's a question of, like, do you throw the baby out with the bathwater if you don't win anything? I'm not sure they would do that.
I think as well, in this era, finishing second to Man City, I think everyone understands what that is. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think not quite getting over the line against this Man City setup is a bit different than finishing second, I don't know, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, And I think there's probably an appreciation for that among the ownership.
Yeah.
I mean, look, they think the world of Mikel Arteta, and they really want him to sign a new contract. I don't think any sort of particular pressure is there. I think it would only really come into the conversation if Arsenal looked like they weren't going to qualify for the Champions League, for example, because the budgets are probably all geared around Champions League participation now. That was the goal for a long time, and football clubs have this habit of when they get into the top four, they kind of act as if they're going to be there forever, and they're the kind of financial outlays that they make. But I think Arsenal have reason to believe that they should be part of that top four for some time to come. I think the pressure from the Cronkies, if there is any, is probably more. Maybe it's more on Eddie than it is on Arteta, in that I think there's probably more pressure around sales and revenue through players. And if you look at our behaviour in the market this summer, as I mentioned earlier, it is kind of a bit more one in, one out. Let's see you bring some money in before we outlay.
Yeah.
I think there's maybe a bit more circumspection about expenditure. I think in previous windows, Arsenal have spent a lot of money kind of on the promise that, no, don't worry, we're going to sell some players. And that hasn't happened. And I think maybe there's a bit more caution, because I don't think the Kroenkes are willing to sort of spend 250 million a summer without bringing anything in.
Sure, I don't think that's unreasonable, to be honest. That's an interesting point. I hadn't thought about that.
But I when I say pressure, I don't,
No, I know what you mean. But
I don't think there is any real pressure. It's more just like, I think that's maybe more the metric they'd be looking at.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get me wrong. They really want to win this thing. And they've done a lot to put Arsenal in a position to potentially do that. But I find it hard to foresee many situations where, where Mykhaylo is threatened in any way, unless something goes
really wrong. Yeah.
Seriously, drastically wrong in a way that none of us anticipate.
Well, let's hope that doesn't happen, obviously. What about...
Certainly there's no track record of us ever, completely getting something wrong and being caught off guard.
No. What about this one from Django on the Discord? He said, good morning, gents. In the NBA world, teams have moved to positionless basketball, replacing traditional positional designations, forward, center, guard, with skills, passer, shooter, rebounder, etc. Football, and especially Arteta's Arsenal, appear to be moving in this direction. What are the skills Arteta is looking for when making his team selection to get his best players on the pitch? And look, I don't know anything about basketball. I'm not sure how much you know about basketball, but I did think this was quite an interesting question in the context of discussions we've had in the past about the signings we've made under Mikel Arteta, where players are not always just wedded to one position.
Yes, I think it seems the recruitment does seem to be led more by the profile than the position. And I think basketball has been an influence for Arteta and Arsenal. He's a guy who tries to take as much as he can from other sports. I think Art wrote a good piece about that, about how other sports have influenced his approach to managing Arsenal. And I think basketball is an influence. What are those traits that he's looking for in his starting 11? I mean, it's hard to go through, isn't it, position by position? But evidently he does, something he talked about from the minute he came into the club was specificity. Mm-hmm. And I think there are very particular traits he's looking for in every part of the pitch. And sometimes they're not necessarily the traits that we historically or traditionally associate with that position. Which is, suggests that he is kind of at the forefront of thinking around this, which is really exciting. And it's kind of an education for us all. I think that could be true anywhere on the pitch. It could be true at centre forward. He is Mykhaylo necessarily thinking about finishing first and foremost in his centre forward? I'm not sure. I think there are other aspects and dimensions to the play that he has prioritised at different points. Same with goalkeeper. There was initially a huge emphasis on playing out from the back. I think if anything, that's continued, and then finding a goalkeeper who really excels in claiming crosses, rather than necessarily being a shot stopper. I think he's always looking for a kind of competitive advantage and a new angle. And I think you can see that right through the team, really.
No, I do think it is very interesting, because you do need, in certain positions, a large dose of specificity. So like your central defenders, for example. Yeah. You don't want them...
True.
You don't need them to be anything other than really fucking good at being a central defender. Whereas when you get further forward, even as you progress through midfield, there is that bit more variance and bit more variety and maybe a bit more versatility needed with certain players. But then it's true the fullback positions as well. Ben White as a right back was not something we thought we were going to see, and he's proven to be one of the best. And the left back issue, I think, is another interesting one. And to be fair, I suppose I'd slightly push back on that in that, at City, Pep has kind of been much more flexible with his understanding of the centre-back role. And even bloody Sheffield United, when a few years ago when they came up, Chris Wilder, they played with a back three, but the two wide centre-halves had sort of a really
flexible, interesting role where they stepped up into midfield. So I think it is even extending to the defensive players. It seems like Arteta is a little bit more conservative than that, and he likes to have his defenders defend first and foremost. But yeah, it is becoming sort of absurd to call it a 4-3-3 or a 4-4-2, or say, Zinchenko is a defender or a midfielder, because there is so much fluidity now, as in basketball, between positions. The formation we play in possession is completely different to the one we play out of it. So some of these distinctions, the traditional distinctions that we have about formation and position, are beginning to feel quite arbitrary.
Yeah. All right. Have you got one?
Yeah, I think so. Jordan Alex said, seeing as we're on Threads, your opinion of the new 3rd/Champions League away kit.
I
Launched
like it
today, of course.
I saw the Patrick Vieira videos and stuff like that. I quite like it. I mean, it's a football kit. It looks great on the players. What can I say?
Looks great on the player. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Does it look great on the player? Yeah, it does. It does. I don't think I could pull that colour off, but, we will see. Time will tell.
Yeah, I don't think I could either, but it does look good on the players.
Yeah, good luck to them.
Yeah.
What about this? I mean, I kind of feel like we haven't done this, but Seaman Jester said, I'd love to hear a discussion about Fabio Vieira. Is he a lost project? And if Arsenal decide to sell, what price could Arsenal expect?
I feel like we kind of have done this, I think, but
I don't think Arsenal will sell.
Not this summer. Not this summer, but I think, as he said maybe last week or a couple of weeks ago, it is a make or break season for him, because I don't really know where he's going to play. Not on the right for me. Don't like it.
Missed out on Sunday, didn't he?
Missed out on Sunday, a little bit of an injury.
He's another who's had a lot of injuries, I think.
Yeah, there you go. There's maybe another reason why you target somebody else for an arrival when you do have a number of injured players. I don't know. What can you do other than wipe the slate clean? You're going into a new season. Let's see how he performs. Let's see how often he plays. Let's see what kind of end product he produces. And I think we'll probably have a better idea of whether he's been a success or not. I mean, I would say so far not. Particularly as he was a not insubstantial arrival in terms of finances.
No, not at all.
So I would say he hasn't been a success yet. I'm prepared to give him, like anyone gives a fuck what I'm prepared to give him. But I just think
Fabio, we have news.
Yeah, Arseblog says,
please listen to this portion of the podcast. We hope it will generate in you the motivation you need for a successful season.
Yeah, exactly. I just think, look, this season will tell us a lot about what's going to happen with him and his future. And if he takes a step forward, brilliant. I'd be delighted to see that. I really would. The more players we have producing for us, the better. But if it goes the same way as the other two, then I think you've basically got to say it didn't work for whatever reason. It's time to go a different way.
Yeah, I agree. I think we've kind of said that all summer, and it always felt like one of him or Smith Rowe would have a place in the squad. It's going to be Fabio Vieira, but I think it's make or break's the only way to say it. And at the moment, I don't hold out a great deal of hope for him, but I hope that he can exceed my expectations.
Yeah, I'm not putting any money on it.
No,
wouldn't do that. But you never.
I do think he's gifted. I think he's got talent. I just don't know how and where it's going to be applied and fit within our system. And to be honest, I'm not sure I ever really saw that. Because if you go back to like at Porto, when he was really shining, he was basically playing as a sort of second striker, like a real old-fashioned number 10. He played a bit deeper sometimes. He played as a false nine a couple of times. He played on the right, I think, here and there. But it was a kind of a 4-4-1-1 or something like that. And I think he had a lot of freedom. And we haven't had a shape or a position like that in the squad for some time.
Yeah. Do you think he was maybe seen as an Odegaard backup or analog, left-footed, technical, creative?
Yeah.
A bit more lightweight than Odegaard, obviously, but somebody who could perhaps play in that position when you need to sit Odegaard down. There have been comparisons made with Bernardo Silva in terms of the physical size of Vieira. I'm not comparing the two players, by the way, because I think one is clearly far better than the other at this point. But that kind of a guy who could give you a bit of depth in a number of positions.
I think so. Yeah, I think in the dream scenario was we've got the next Bernardo Silva, we've got the next Bruno Fernandes. I think that was kind of what they were hoping. But I do have a question over system, and I forget if at the point we signed him, it was 2 summers ago, were we playing something more like a 4-2-3-1? I think that would have fit him better. Not to go back to all these old arbitrary distinctions about formation. But I just don't really buy that a player with his physical limitations is going to work for us in a 3. I just don't see that. Yeah. And I think that's probably why we're seeing him turn up on the wing now.
Yeah.
So, don't hold out a great deal of hope, but his case will be an interesting one to follow over the course of the season.
All right, let's do one final one before we go. It comes from Mr. Han, 1992 on the Discord. He says, please pick your preferred starting 11 against Wolves. Not the one you think Mikel Arteta would pick, but the one you would pick.
Oh, well, that's a bit different. Okay, well, I presume we'll both go David Raya in goal, I imagine.
Yeah.
We got Wolves at home. I think I'd pick the same back 4. I mean, look, I'd love to pick Calafiori, but I don't see the need to rush him into it.
I agree with that, even though I do, and like many people do, and I'm sure you do too, have some, concerns over Zinchenko defensively.
Yeah, I thought he was good against Lyon, Zinchenko.
Yeah, I thought he was, he's been all right this preseason. It wasn't great in the Liverpool game, maybe, but I think in terms of, what he offers you on the ball for a home game against Wolves, and I'm not taking anything for granted, I think based on the fact that Calafiori's only just come in, Timber, played in the first part of preseason but has been injured and may come back in, do you rush him as well? I prefer either Calafiori to be established or for Timber to be fully fit, and I would pick one of those ahead of Zinchenko, ideally. But I think on the basis of what we've got available to us right now, he's the one I would go with.
Then in midfield, what would you pick in midfield?
I would pick, people won't like it, but I would pick Rice, Havertz, Odegaard.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. Go on, explain yourself, Andrew.
Well, it's a home game. I think, we're more than capable of controlling a game against Wolves at home with that midfield. And I think, I'll go in on my front 3 then, because I would play Trossard, Jesus, Saka as my front 3. And I just think it allows you to get more threat on the pitch, on a day where I think we are likely to be in control of most of this game. And I know people have concerns or worries about Havertz in midfield, which I get, but I thought he was good against Liverpool in midfield. I thought he worked really hard. I think for this kind of game against this kind of opposition, I think you can, if you want to call it a risk, I think you can take that kind of risk.
Do you know what, Andrew? I think I might agree. I wasn't going to say that. I was going to pick Havertz up top.
Right.
I would have gone Trossard on the left. And then in midfield, I was kind of deciding between Jorginho and Partey. But I think you've talked me into that.
Right.
I think that, we've looked at our most fluid in pre-season playing that way. It slightly worries me. As I say, we don't really have another centre forward in the squad, apart from the ones on the pitch. But I also have like a nagging question over the number 6 position, and
I do too. Yeah,
yeah. One of my disappointments about pre-season is that we've not yet had a look at Declan Rice playing there, because I'm just not sure I see Partey and Jorginho, good players though they have been at various points, as enough.
I share that concern, and it's not so much about what these guys are capable of doing on the ball, because I think, they're both, very talented on the ball. My concern over both of these players is the off the ball aspect of their games, where, at 30 plus, the legs aren't quite what they were. I know Jorginho was never like Mr. Zippy or anything like that. I worry about Partey off the ball as well. I don't think his legs are where they need to be for a long season. So that is an area where I do have a little bit of a concern. But I wonder again if you bring someone like Marino in, does that give you the Rice 6, Marino 8, Havertz, Jesus up top kind of vibe going on? So
yeah. I
did
do
you
feel
make
like
that
that's
point?
Probably where we're headed.
Did you make that point on your video yesterday about Marino being like a first team player for Real Sociedad and probably isn't going to come to Arsenal at 28 years of age to be like a bit part squad player?
I just said I wasn't. I didn't know, but I imagined he would have designs on playing.
Sure.
And I think given what it would cost Arsenal, I think they'd have designs on him playing a lot of games too.
Okay. So you're all in on my team selection then, are you?
Yeah.
All
You've
right.
absolutely sold me on that. Do you think that's what Mykhaylo will do?
No.
I'm inclined to agree. I think he'll play Partey probably.
That's what I think. And he'll play Havertz up front.
Yeah.
And he'll have Jesus as an option from the bench.
Yeah.
If we need something.
Martinelli are nice subs to have up your sleeve. And I think if he can get Calafiori on, get Timber on, he will, but I don't think he'll rush to start them.
No, I don't think so either. I don't think so. But you never know. We could be surprised. Variety is something we looked for at the start of this podcast, and maybe we'll get it at the start of the new Premier League season. So
very true.
So who knows? Anyway, lots to come on the site over the course of the week. We will, of course, be doing our big preview on arseblog.com as we do every year. We'll have a podcast preview podcast over on Patreon. We'll have an Arsecast for you on Friday, looking ahead to the new season as well. So loads to get our teeth into over the course of this week. For now, though, we better leave it there. As ever, thank you very much indeed, as always, for being with us. Hope you enjoyed the show, and we will catch you on the next one.
Bye-bye.